It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 332. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Kodra.
For legal reasons, this is not financial advice.
Tam.
We like the stock.
Phelan.
Hey.
I feel like that's not on the list, but like that's a thing.
You don't think that's on the list? This should be an interesting
Stonks.
Conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's on the list. You just don't realize it yet.
I just don't realize it's on the list? Okay. Then I'll wait. So we did that thing where we kind of started a conversation before the podcast, and as a result, we're going to pretend we didn't start the conversation before the podcast.
Well, I mean, we stopped ourselves before getting too far into it.
We did.
Which is better than normal.
Yeah.
So Celeste turned 3 this week. And as a result, Maddie Thorson put out a new game, Celeste Classic 2, which you can play right now on the Pico 8 emulator on the web, and I have, and it's very fun. I recommend everyone check it out if you want to. The theme of this game is hurtling yourself towards death. Instead of like the mid-air dash mechanic from the normal Celeste, you now have a grappling hook. And a big part of the game is to grapple to things, and then while you're mid-grapple, jump to like gain a trajectory boost. But by the end of the game, frequently what you are grappling towards is a wall of spikes. So it's can you manage to time your jump just right so that you execute a cool-looking jump and don't run headlong into spikes.
I'm pretty sure for me the answer would be no.
Yeah, like my answer is probably no as well.
But as a result, I've been revisiting Celeste and also some of Maddie's old games like Jumper, which I played back in college. But Celeste means I am playing it on the Switch, and I am trying to go through and get all of the main story strawberries, all of the hearts, and then I am also working on the B-sides. So I've completed the first and second B-side and all of the strawberries and hearts in the first and second section. I just finished all of the berries and hearts in the third section, and I just got started on the B-side. But playing it, my thumb now hurts. The D-pad is kind of got some sharp edges for a D-pad, and so my thumb is sore at this point. And also, I'm gonna say there were some times when I could not tell why the input was right or right plus up. And that matters a lot in Celeste. Because that's the difference between dashing where you want to go and dashing where you don't want to go. Because your dash is one of 8 directions based on which way your D-pad is going. Or joystick, but joystick is not optimal for platformers because, again, it's really reading one of 8 things. Like your joystick is in one of 8 positions, so it might as well be it would be better if it was a D-pad.
I'm going to suggest that on the Switch, you might be better off with the joystick.
You might be
its
right.
ability to detect diagonals.
Uh-huh.
And I'm starting to think that you might be right. Although this is also, I think, where I think I would really like it if I could get, what did you call it? An octagonal gate?
Yeah, I mentioned that briefly.
Oh, man.
Like, is there a way to get an octagonal gate controller for the...
Not that I know of.
Like
They don't really make them in controller size.
Yeah, like basically you're going to a fight stick if you want an octagonal gate.
But like, you see why I would say that, right, Ash?
That's why I said it.
Like, it'd be really nice if I could just really know with high confidence, yes, I am pressing in this one of 8 directions with this stick. Because
that sounds like you want a fight stick.
I've
never understood. Well, no, you really don't want a fight stick because you don't want to lug around a fight stick. But I've also never understood why the difference between Japanese controllers and North American controllers. I don't know why, by default, a Japanese fight stick is going to have a square gate, which seems like the worst of all worlds.
It doesn't seem great, I'll admit that.
I mean, because it's got 2 sides that feel like they're banging against the gate way too soon. Well, actually, basically, up, down, left, and right feel that way. And then if you're doing a diagonal, it feels like it takes forever for you to hit the gate.
I guess the thought there is that because you have a sense of up, down, left, right better than you have a sense of diagonals, it's more important that the diagonals be more in a gate when you slam against it.
Yeah.
Well, and this goes back to the conversation from last week with Tam, where maybe some people don't slam against the wall.
But also,
I do.
That's also if you map your control stick as this X value, this Y value, a square gate gives you the full range of possible values, whereas an octagonal gate does not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's useful. I'm just saying that might be how we got there in the first place.
But yeah, so I'm curious. I need a control solution for the Switch that is either a better D-pad than the Pro Controller or something that is going to allow me to better precision platform. Because Celeste wants precision.
Have you met our Lord and Savior 8-Bit Doe?
I have not.
I was actually going to recommend the official SNES controller, but I don't know if you can get it anymore.
I don't think you can anymore. So honestly, my favorite D-pads on any controller are the ones by 8-Bit Do or Doe. I don't know. Is it 8-Bit Doe?
I don't know.
8-Bit Do. Because to me, it looks like it's a play on Nintendo. So it should be 8-Bit Doe. But some people say Do. I don't know. Anyway, they have really good D-pads.
Okay. Interesting.
And they're Bluetooth, so they just work with the Switch.
Okay.
And they'll also just work with your phone and just work with anything else. And all of them support both X input and direct input, and you can flip back and forth between them. So you can make it work with things that require a specific flavor.
The other hilarious solution I have.
Okay, what's X input?
X input is the way the Xbox 360 controller connects to PC.
Ah, okay.
It's
and direct input
standard
is or PlayStation.
Well, no, it's direct input was the standard before 2006, but a lot of things still use it. My other suggestion would be, amusingly, because I know you can still get this, the Pokken controller.
Yeah. I have heard that the Pokken controller has a good D-pad. I know that's what Grand Pooh Bear recommends whenever he's doing Mario Maker stuff.
The problem I have with the Pokken controller is it's just not a comfortable shape to me. It's a weird shaped controller.
I rather like it, but it's kind of it's bigger than you would expect for the shape it is.
So this is what always also kind of weirded me out. Why is this specific? Pokken is a very specific game. It's a fighting game. I would imagine this controller would be optimized for fighting games.
I mean, needs solid directional inputs is also a fighting game thing.
I guess that's fair.
Fighting games are also about inputting specific directions with very clear timing.
I guess that, yeah. All right, I'll have to look into those.
Well, and part of the problem is most D-pads anymore have cheaped out and now just have 4 microswitches.
And that isn't, I think, I was under the Switch Pro controller. Without, I think, central rocker or anything like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is why you can get erroneous inputs a lot.
Yes, this would explain it. No, it's there's definitely a couple of sections where I was trying to do some very precise There's one strawberry in the third world that has a mechanic where basically any floor you step on becomes lava, and you have to go through this section and then grab a strawberry and go through that exact same section again, only wherever you stepped the first time is now lava. And this meant I had to be doing some I was trying to do very precise things on the first go around so that I could leave myself with a very, just big enough areas on the second go around to get through it. And so it's one of those things where anytime you have done 80% of a thing and then a bad input kills you, it's incredibly frustrating. In a game that is honestly probably trying to be pretty frustrating, you don't want your controller to cost you lives. But I do think Celeste is a very good game. I sung its praises when it came out. It's still really fun. And it's got a very heartwarming story. And getting through the original game is a challenge for sure. And you don't have to try and go to Farewell, even though I am. So I will let you know how my journey to Farewell goes. I imagine it's going to be long and arduous. It is interesting, though, that I have seen some playthroughs of Farewell, and I still have not learned all of the techniques that they expect you to know by the time you get to the end of this game. So that's fun.
I know that one of the last Seasides teaches you one of the alleged speedrunner techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that Farewell teaches you the only remaining missing one, in the actual level.
Yeah, I've seen... I know that it requires you to do some of the wall boosts, which I don't know how to do, and also some of the dash jumps, which I also don't really know how to do.
Yeah, that's the one that is actually tutorialized within Farewell.
Okay. I do know that there was some discussion from Maddie about adding some accessibility features specifically for making some of those speedrun techniques easier to pull off. Like a single button that combines both of those inputs, essentially. But yes, I also, if you enjoy Celeste, I recommend checking out Celeste Classic 2.
So this is kind of tangential to the controller discussion. I have to say, I miss an era when you could actually go someplace and play with controllers. Because I have very specific tastes that are very hard to quantify in a controller. And as a result, I have so many random controllers that I bought over the years that I thought looked interesting and then never really used.
I kind of also have this problem.
I mean, I could return them, but that's a lot of hassle.
I mean, I have a Steam controller because I thought it would be interesting.
It is absolutely interesting, but it's not the good kind of interesting. There's things I like about the Steam controller. I like the controller shape, but if they had just put a normal standard control scheme on it, it would be great.
Man.
Because it feels very comfortable in your hand. It's just, I don't want a haptic thumb pad.
I don't think they made the case for that thumb pad.
No, I
get they wanted to try something new, and they wanted to. Standard controllers at this point are, I guess, a learned thing. We're now just used to them. Yeah. But I don't think they did any better at creating a good entry point for controllers with this thing.
Yeah. I think that the technology in the Steam controller is incredible. And I like what the Steam controller represents as a way of thinking about user input in video games that isn't slaved to the NES. That's actually rethinking how we should interface with video games rather than just copying what came before.
But they didn't stick the landing.
So
it's just overall kind of frustrating to use if you're used to controllers.
In fairness, if you've heard the show where I gush about the Steam VR controllers, I think that it was the thing that made those possible, almost certainly.
That would make sense.
But yeah, I also think that there's a philosophical thing where I think that we are limited in the game experiences that we are able to have because of our controllers.
Yeah, but the problem with that is there needs to be both a game that represents what a controller can do, plus a new control scheme if you're going to really roll that out. And I mean, like, VR is a great example. VR requires a new kind of controller.
Yeah, no, there's a whole it's a whole chicken and egg problem.
Okay, so what is Crying Suns?
Crying Suns has been my obsession for the last week.
I feel like it's a bit of a surprise that I didn't discover this game before it became free on Epic.
I'd sort of looked at it, but I'd never been like, oh yeah, this is what I want to play. So sometime back, one of the most compelling mobile games, I don't think it started as a mobile game, but I played it on mobile, and it was super compelling as a mobile game, was FTL. And FTL is a roguelike where you're in a ship, like you're in a starship trying to make it through a bunch of space. And there's like events that happen and fights you get in and so on and so forth. And it's almost great. It's got some balance issues. It has the perennial roguelike problem where there's really cool stuff for you to unlock, but the thing you start with is not the best / not the most interesting. And so you kind of have to suffer through that to get to the stuff that's good. But the structure is really neat. Like, you plot your course through the stars, trying to stay one step ahead of a pursuing force, go on adventures, upgrade your ship, etc. And it's fun. It also has just an absolutely ridiculously punishing final sequence that's like,
yeah,
it's like this vertical cliff where
the difficulty of the last boss is nonsense.
Yeah, like the last boss is so brutally difficult compared to everything you've done before that basically, like, if you haven't mocked your way all the way up to the final boss, you probably don't have a chance against the final boss. And it's just super uneven. So Crying Suns is just like a clear iteration on FTL. It's a very similar structure. It has difficulty modes.
More roguelites should have difficulty modes.
Agreed. It does the kind of real-time with pause, and I've railed against real-time with pause combat before, but it actually kind of works here, where you issue commands and things will go and do your commands until you pause again and redirect them, which you can, or just redirect them on the fly, which you also can. But like, it doesn't require micro, at least not like at most you're commanding 4 units. So it's not that wild. And like combat, it's battleship combat. So it's not like crazy fast. It's not like, oh, I did a twitch, I misclicked and now it's all over. And it's neat because there's a whole bunch of different things going on. Like, you can upgrade parts of your ship. FTL had a whole thing where like the physical layout of your ship mattered in a kind of Galaxy Trucker sort of way. And I think it was interesting in concept, but it didn't really add much, and it added a bunch of frustration because it would be like, whoops, the opposing force randomly beamed onto the ship, and now your shield room is down, and now somebody's got to run from the other side of the ship to the shield room, and so it's just like a compounding failure. Whereas they don't really have that. That doesn't really exist in Crying Suns. There's a lot more emphasis on like your fleets of little ships, cruisers and frigates and fighters and drones, which all work against one another in a kind of rock, paper, scissors style. And it's really neat. It's got more storytelling. There's more variety. I got to the point where I think I saw some of the events multiple times, but they can play out differently, rather than just like, hey, what's the right answer for this event? There's a bunch of events that are like, hey, do you meet this requirement? Then you can go down a different path, or this is a thing that might work and might not work. So it varies up what the events are like, and you can like land on planets. I really enjoy it. It does the kind of cyclic. It's got a good like conceit for the cyclic play. It's definitely kind of bleak. You're trying to race across what used to be a connected galaxy and is now shattered. And you're seeing like the aftermath of the fall of this once great star empire, or once massive and functioning anyway, star empire. It's pretty good about like revealing who your character is and who all the other characters are. I don't know. I really enjoyed it and played through it on normal. Like I played through it on easy, decided it was a little too easy because I just won all the time, and so bumped it up a bit. But it's still cool. There's a bunch of different like varying options and ways to build your character, and officers you can pick up who give you different abilities.
So you mentioned there was like multiple chapters. If you lose, do you start at the chapter you were on, or do you go all the way back to the beginning?
You every time you finish a chapter, it basically checkpoints.
Okay.
So it checkpoints at whatever chapter you got to. And between chapters, you basically your ship resets. So like each chapter, it's not like a continuous thing where you're building up a ship from zero to something gigantic. You're resetting with each chapter. But when you reset, you've probably unlocked new stuff. You always unlock a new ship with each chapter. You may have found more officers to join you, that kind of thing. The ships are better balanced. There's a bunch of really interesting ones, and they all kind of support different play styles. There's the ship that encourages you to just spam hideous numbers of drones. You just swarm people with explosive drones, and you don't care if your drones. And it's got a whole thing where if your ships get destroyed, they basically get a debuff where they have half health, and then once they recharge, you can use them again. And then they don't recover from being at half health until you repair them at like a starbase. And one of the ships is just like, yeah, whatever, we don't care about that. Your ships go out at a quarter health, but they recharge like 4 times as fast. So you can just spam them out constantly. But the drones explode when they die. So you just send like drone bombs at people.
Nice.
Until they just collapse under the weight of your terrible drone bombs. And the drone bombs are totally indiscriminate. They'll blow up your stuff too. So if you want, you can send like 4 drones at something big, and then when one blows, it blows up all the other ones, and you set off a terrible chain reaction. And you got another one that's very much the opposite. That's all about like a smaller number of elite ships. So there's a bunch of different play styles. I feel like I can actually build towards play styles in a way that other similar games don't really let you. They give you a lot more options for equipment and ships and so on. And it's, it gets stingier at higher difficulties, but broadly it works out. But yeah, it was fun. It was nice to see it. It was nice to see it with a little bit more of a story than, oh no, run away from the people until you get to fight the people at the other end somehow. I'm not sure that FTL's story really made a lot of sense to me.
I mean,
Hades has spoiled me, honestly, on roguelikes with stories.
Hades? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That is...
It is difficult to compare anything else in the genre to that at this point.
Yes. I feel like... Yeah, I feel like we're gonna be trying to grasp that ring for a very long time. Because not only was it so good, but it was also just obviously a ton of work to write and produce that much narrative content for a game. So that, yes, you die, and like there was a Polygon, it was Polygon's Game of the Year, and their video, like, the big thing that Hades does right is death is something you get to look forward to, which is not the case in most roguelikes, even though every roguelike you're supposed to die a lot. Like, death is something that even when you die, it's like, well, now I get something new and exciting. Not, oh, I'm frustrated and I have to start over.
Yeah, and this Crying Suns, at least for me, did a pretty good job of, I died infrequently enough that it wasn't super frustrating. Like, I think the chapter, the between chapter reset was a good mechanism, because it accomplished the reset loop that it kind of needs, because it's a roguelike, without making me feel like I wasn't progressing.
Okay, I have no idea how to ease into this one. Why games are important.
or exploiting systems.
Stonks.
Yes. Yeah, so until when did games go mainstream? Like late 90s? Started to go mainstream in the late 90s?
Maybe even later than that. Like,
Maybe
actually mainstream. I mean, probably really when smartphones became a thing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you consider the line for mainstream to be 10 million or so, then FF7 was the first mainstream video game.
There you go. But, like, those feel relatively recent on, the scale of generations. And, I mean, okay, this is me being a giant media nerd. Deal with it, .jpg. But, like, the media you consume influences the way you see the way you experience the world, the way you see the world, and the way you operate. Like, this isn't even up for debate. Like, that's just research. Like, child developmental research points to that in every capacity. So for the last several generations, you had TV, movies, books, radio, all passive consumptive entertainment, and like sports, which you probably played sports, but if you played sports, it's less, as an individual, you are mostly less concerned with the tactics and more with, can my body physically do the things I'm telling it to do? Execution more than strategy. And now we have video games. Now games are super widespread. Everyone plays games, and you have an entire generation starting with Gen X, amplifying with millennials, and super hyper amplified with Gen Z, where just playing games is normal, and people looking at systems and figuring out how to interact with them the way you might in a game is kind of that's just like de rigueur for everybody.
We've created maybe multiple generations of rules lawyers and exploiters.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that's how you win at games. Like, if what you want to do is win at games,
you figure out how to optimize.
You optimize them. You break them.
What is the meta? What is optimal?
you figure out what you need to select and what you need to do. Like, if your goal is winning, and it's a thing, people get criticized, and you can go back and forth on whether this is rightly. I think it depends on the situation, about people who win, people whose goal it is to win at whatever cost. Like, they address the game with the sole view of winning at all times, and not really, like, it's not about what is the shared experience of everybody participating, or like what is the story being told. It's like, no, how do I win?
Well, so just a side jaunt, this week a bunch of information was released from a website called Raider.io about the launch of Shadowlands. And one of the narratives that Blizzard told ahead of it was, it doesn't matter what covenant you pick, just pick the one you like the most. And if you listen to their spiel, it sounds like they believed that was going to be the reality. That was very much not the reality. In every single case, every single class picked the one, like by overwhelming amounts, like 80% of players went with the one that is optimal.
Yep. And because WoW has evolved into a game about winning.
Yep.
It's crowded out everything else you might do in that game for the most part. And even if you personally aren't approaching WoW with that mindset, enough other players are that you don't really have a choice but to conform, or you're going to have a bad experience. Which is the problem with that mindset, is that you force everybody to conform. Like, if you can have people who feel forced to conform to a hyper-optimized, hyper-competitive mindset simply because they're surrounded by other people who are. But if you have that mindset, you start applying it to other things, like any complex system or rule set.
Stonks!
So, mild story. I had a conversation with some coworkers a while back about, like, I don't know, 14, 15 months ago, about what happens if you're holding stock when a company goes bankrupt. And none of us really knew, because it's not like that's a thing that we do. Like, I don't just own that much random stock, and certainly not like weird edge stock like that. So I bought some shares of a company I thought was going to go under to just see.
Would the name of this company start with a G?
Yeah. Because again, like, I'm not a stock picker. I'm not an investor. I picked a company that I knew something about that I thought wasn't going to do all that hot.
I mean, a lot of other people agreed with you.
Yeah. And it hadn't occurred to me, like, it doesn't surprise me that you have large scale, like, financial outfits, hedge funds, etc., manipulating the stock market as if it's a game for their own benefit, turning it into a game that they can win. Mm-hmm. Previously, that was inaccessible to people. Even if you could buy in, it's not like you could understand it. People just weren't primed for that, and people haven't been primed for that for decades. Like, I chat with my parents about it, and my parents are like, "Ugh, playing the stock market like that is playing with fire. You don't understand what's going on. There are people whose entire jobs it is to understand that and play it."
And the other part of their job is to make sure that you think that you can't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And the other thing is that, like, my parents, incredibly smart people, but they're not trained. They haven't been trained since they had a single-digit age to look at and take apart systems and analyze them and optimize them. It's just not. It's not the way they think about things. Whereas I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that. Like, that exploit seems obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even need to fully understand the rules to see the shape of them. But
it's interesting, because I'm also like, okay, so I'm on the counterplay here. What are the things that you need to be worrying about your opponents doing? I am wondering, and this is where I need more understanding. What is to stop one of, like, the idea here is these short sellers, these people shorting the stock, are going to need to buy a whole bunch of it. What is to stop them from going to the broker, and the broker has a single share of stock that they buy and give back to that broker X number of times, rather than going to the retail investors who are hoping to sell when the short squeeze happens?
I think at some point you do actually run into the FCC here.
Yeah, you have to buy that stock and give it back to who you borrowed it from.
Right.
Yeah, but can you buy it from the person you borrowed it from and give it back to them?
I mean, that person has no interest in you doing that.
Why would they? Then they would lose all the money.
Because you're paying them.
You're paying them that much.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a lot of cases, the answer to why don't they do X is because it might make the SEC start looking at them harder and actually start regulating again.
And where I get really... This is where I think the SEC needs to step in, is what happens when these brokerages are underwriting the hedge funds that are doing the shorts. So the brokerages that they owe all of this money to are starting to invest into the hedge funds that owe them the money. Then there's conflicts of interest.
And this is exact.
But to be fair, that's always happened.
I mean, there were conflicts of interest before. They're just extra obvious in this situation.
We're getting them to be very, very obvious here.
Yes.
Well, and that's a game tactic.
Yes.
Like, look at every griefer in WoW who sits around flagged, standing on top of an NPC, trying to get you to right-click them instead of the NPC to trick you into flagging. It is a griefer tactic that we all know intrinsically.
Yeah.
Like, it's so obvious to us that because we've been trained to see it. And we've been trained to see it in a way that a lot of people haven't. But there's more and more people with our background looking at games and applying it to real life.
Well, and the problem is like the financial system is not designed for trolls.
It's not. I mean, a lot of systems that we have are not designed for that.
Our government is also not designed for trolls.
No, our government is very not designed for trolls.
Our legal system?
Yeah. All these systems rely very much on the people who are involved with them have an investment in the system continuing.
Right. And if you're and which is the interesting thing about games and especially MMOs is that trolls do not care if the game's health continues.
Yep.
They'll just move on.
Some folks just want to see the world burn.
Well, yeah. But that's part of it too, is like, so when you have lived your life as an outsider and not had access to all of these things, then what is the motivation to like not just want it all to burn down around you? Like, there is, like, if you're not a participant in the system because you feel like you can't participate in the system, then what is the motivation that's keeping people from just wanting it all to burn?
I mean, the expected
motivation.
motivation.
That is how we got started here in the first place.
Yeah, the expected motivation is that to be able to affect the system, you have to be able to participate. And once you're participating, you're invested. But the cost of participation is now extremely low to nothing. So not all that invested necessarily.
But there's also a lot of emotions here.
That too.
I was going to say, I don't think it can be understated how much bad blood there is over the fact that we had a financial collapse 12 years ago, and basically everyone involved is fine at this point.
A financial collapse caused to a great degree by hedge funds?
Yes. So
someone else picked up the tab.
So someone else picked up the tab, and at this point, it's like, well, like there is, like people on, like the media have been bemoaning the demonization of the Wall Street hedge fund, but it's like there's a
You're a few years too late for the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is a system that exists for. It is a system that, on paper, exists for a sensible reason, and in practice is a brutal exploit.
Well, yeah, but
which we've seen this in games constantly. Like, no designer builds a thing and they're like, oh yeah, this is super broken, super excited to see it released live. I'm gonna go win all my PvP matches with this new broken thing. Like, no, nobody does that.
Well, like, I remember back in EverQuest, there was a thing you could do where you buy an entire inventory of something from Freeport, take the boat to Thurgoden, buy something else there, then craft an end product that sold for like twice what you put into it. So, of course, people were doing the thing to quickly gain some platinum and it eventually got patched. But like, to me, our financial system is basically that. Like, money is made from other money. Money isn't made from product. Money is made from other money.
Yeah, it's made by pushing money around, and magically more money appears.
Exactly. It's this weird shell game that suddenly doubles your money.
So it fundamentally makes a little bit more sense when you basically are like, the financial market is the democratization of loans. Like, anyone can buy a share, aka loan money to this venture, and if that venture does well, that share pays out interest.
Yep. But then so that's basically you betting on that doing well. But
Yes.
then other people can bet on your bet. And then other people can bet on their bets on your bets. And other people can bet on those bets.
So that's where things get very weird. Like, shorts definitely feel a lot weirder. Because they're basically a form of saying, I think the stock is going to go down. This is definitely one of those things that I think needs to be probably more heavily regulated, because you're basically putting no skin in the game up front, and then what happens if you're caught holding the bag? Like, because you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to borrow your stock. Don't worry, I'll get it. I'll give it back to you in a couple months' time, and then I'm going to sell that stock. And then in a couple months' time, I'll buy that stock and give it back to you, plus some interest. And basically, you're saying, yeah, I think the stock price is going to go down. So if I sell it at 10 now, I can buy it at 5 in a month's time. But if you sell it at 10 now, and in a month's time it's 1,000, and you don't have $990, like, what happens?
Anybody who has played the WoW auction house or any auction house in any game understands this mechanic.
Yeah, no, it's and then it's like, oh, you have to buy, and this is where the gaming comes in. You have to buy this stock at this time. Okay, cool. I will make sure that the price is high, and I will make sure I'm holding a lot of that stock.
Yep. Oh, patches coming out with...
Yeah, I'm going to stockpile the things that are going to be useful come patch.
And I think that when I was growing up, the big argument for like the majority of my life was this games as art question. And putting aside the fact that it's not even a sensical question to begin with, but even putting that aside, I don't think that's the important question. Like, yeah, sure, games are art, absolutely. There's no meaningful question there, nor is the answer to that question intrinsically meaningful either.
Yeah.
It's more, what are games teaching us? What are we learning to do? You know, are we as refined? You know, I think that there's a decent argument to be made that, like, we may not be as good writers as the previous generation, because that's not the media that we consume. But, like, you know what I sure don't have? I sure don't have the videography chops of your average TikToker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's hard. I don't know how to do that.
There's so many weird things that happen now, just a matter of course, that did not exist a decade ago.
Yeah.
For example, Netflix. I was watching this thing talking about all these trends that have been escalated in part because of a single popular show. So, like, when Queen's Gambit blew up, which is a show about chess, it caused an overnight spike of 25% in chessboard sales. And, like, nobody could keep them in stock for a little bit. And, like, chess has long been a thing that was dead or dying. But now suddenly this one show revitalizes it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that's necessarily new. I mean, when the first Lassie movie came out, suddenly everybody wanted a collie.
It seems to happen faster though.
Mm-hmm.
Because it took a long time because it would take a while before that thing cycled through the nation, but now it's overnight. Like the thing airs.
It's available to everybody simultaneously, and yeah,
because the internet's
it's an instant global phenomenon, and that also means that the things that used to be reserved for elite specialist organizations, like, I don't know, financial institutions, because of the speed at which information travels, the advantages they have, which is a lot of analysts all looking at the available data, also instantly over the internet.
Some just literal institutional advantages that can't be overcome. I'm looking at you, Robinhood, selling user purchasing data to a firm that's going to front run with HFT.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely. There's but even that, it's like you're winnowing down the institutional advantages that exist.
I mean, that one just feels very gamey. Like, I can just see that's cheating.
No, it's absolutely cheating. I'm always looking at your hand in Magic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
For no cost, just all the time. I'm looking at your hand in Magic. I would change the game a little bit.
A little bit.
But this year has had a lot of weird things go on. Like, for example, those same technologies that were designed for high frequency trading have been abused to write bots to take PlayStations off the market and scalp them.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the same concept.
It is.
It is. It absolutely is. Which sucks for anybody that actually wants the thing. But yeah, it is taking the rules of the game that were once reserved for a privileged few and applying it just across the board.
Yeah.
But people have time to learn how games work. People are more, to your point, Tim, people are very in tune with how does this system, analyzing systems.
Uh-huh. Well, and again, with the internet and, message boards and things like Reddit, it's very easy for a bunch of people to all get together and work together at that.
Right. I mean, you see that in gaming communities all the time, to where, especially Destiny, for example, constantly puts in puzzles that require all kinds of stupid stuff, but they get solved in days because there's Reddits and Discords that are all collaborating together to solve the puzzle. But that's now being applied to other things.
Well, and it's an interesting back and forth because I lost my train of thought. Because a Destiny encounter, if you put us in a brand new Destiny encounter, we would have no idea how to even approach it most of the time.
Right. And that was the big problem we had when we were trying, is there was a gap in knowledge that we were lacking. We were applying MMO techniques, but it didn't necessarily always work like we expected.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you went into an FF14 extreme fight or ultimate savage fight with no knowledge of the mechanics, trying to figure out the mechanics just by bashing your heads against it, and that's it would take you forever and it would feel impossible. But there's enough people doing that, and enough people picking out, there's enough people standing around dying in order for them to read a debuff that they just got and understand how it works, that once all of that information is shared, you can piece together something. And it takes, a couple of days at most, if not hours. And then everything after that is execution.
Right. Well, you can see that in the raid races because, Shadowlands got released and as soon as the raid opened, everybody had beaten normal and heroic that were on the tryhard circuit just instantly, because they'd already experienced enough of the content in testing that they could extrapolate whatever changes were made and just clear it. But like part of it too is we've developed this shorthand for everything that we can explain things by way of other things. And I think that same shorthanding is now being applied to real world concepts too.
Mm-hmm.
It's Darmak and Jalad at Tanagra.
It absolutely is.
Star Trek predicting memes many, many years in advance.
I mean, like, think about like just your daily interactions. How often are you, without realizing, transmitting a full thought with only a handful of words?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I mean,
yeah, it's like, you know, like because of shared interactions or, you know, because of cultural impacts, like you can say 1-2 words and what is actually spoken is like a paragraph of meaning.
Yeah, like we literally are the culture in Darmok now. Like we are. Like that's just who we are.
Yeah, like
one of the finest science fiction stories out there, by the way.
I've mostly watched this whole thing unfold with, I don't know, like I feel two things. Like one, I have a pension, so I certainly hope it's not going to burn down around me. But two, also I think it's hilarious.
I mean, this is the thing is I don't actually know how much pensions are like into hedge funds.
I mean, they sure shouldn't be, but that doesn't mean they aren't.
Yeah,
right,
okay.
Exactly. Well, and even more so, like a lot of people over the last decade have had their employers switch to self-insured plans.
Well, yeah, I mean, pensions are barely a thing these days.
Yeah,
like, they have been replaced by 401ks. This was done deliberately because because you have to fund a pension. A 401k, you just have to, like, you know, put a little bit of money in, and if the stock market keeps doing what it's supposed to, eventually it'll pay off a lot. But, you know.
But like here at least, there's been a lot of employers that have switched their medical insurance to self-insured.
Oof.
Yeah, and so like that a lot of times is backed by, you know, at a minimum index funds.
Yep.
Wait, how does that work?
I mean, the stock market only ever goes up. It's a sure bet, right?
Right. You take in premiums, they go into a pool, that pool gets invested, and then they pay out when things happen. Yes.
Yeah. Because, you know, the kind of situation where a lot of people might need that health insurance certainly might not be the same sort of situation that could damage the stock market.
Oh.
Right. Yeah.
That's unimaginable.
That's been a thing. Like, that's been a big thing in red states, has been the shift away from
health insurance,
traditional health insurance plans to creating self-insured plans that are underwritten by a United or a Blue Cross Blue Shield, but are really out of the employer's pocket.
Huh.
It's a terrible idea. They sure try to make you think it's a good idea, but it's not.
It seems like there would be problems with risk pooling. Also,
sure does.
Also,
stuff like
to be gamed.
Waves hand at world around us. In these trying times, that seems like a bad thing to be doing. I love all the COVID euphemisms. And by love, I mean hate.
Well, in the before times, no one thought a pandemic was happening or was going to come.
It really does. We talk about the before times. This really does feel epical. Like we could potentially start renumbering years after. Maybe that's just because it's this immediate and present in our lives.
I mean, I only slightly use before times as a tongue-in-cheek reference because I think where we're going after this is going to look different than where we've been.
Well, I've had several of those events already in my lifetime.
I'd kind of like to stop having those events in my lifetime.
But what's weird about that, though, is the frequency has increased. Because I guess for me, like the first one of those events that I remember was the Challenger explosion. And then the Murrah bombing.
I was going to say, I actually have no concept of how the Challenger changed things. When I think of them, I think three, basically, which is 9/11, the 2008 crash, and now COVID. Like, I can mark I remember what the world used to be like, and the world is absolutely changed afterwards.
So for me, the Challenger was a loss of innocence in our space program.
Yeah.
It was no longer, like, prior to Challenger, it was unbridled optimism about where we were going to go. It was absolutely certain we were going to have a moon base. It was absolutely certain that we're going to colonize Mars. It was just a reality. Like, this is where we're going. And then, we lost a civilian on a NASA mission. And what made it worse, though, for me is, like, it's hard to put into context what this event was like if you were a school kid at this era.
Yeah, well, I mean, because
this was a school teacher. Like,
they were airing it in a lot of classrooms because this was a school teacher.
I watched it real time.
Yeah,
in class.
It was, yeah.
I remember kids screaming when it exploded. Like, it was a thing. Like, and maybe the ramifications are not the same as like the .com crash, but it definitely felt like this is I don't know, like it was a loss of hope in the space program. And I don't think that the space program ever really fully recovered from it.
No. I mean, we barely have a space program now. So no. Like, we certainly don't have a manned space program. That's all in the hands of Elon Musk.
And I think Murrah bombing really is a localized thing for me. Probably most people did not experience it, but like that was my 9/11. It just happened years before. Because like that was like everyone knew someone that lost someone in the Murrah bombing here.
I will say that in the entire rest of the country, we refer to that as the Oklahoma City bombing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is one of the moments I was thinking of.
I had to look it up.
I just didn't recognize it by that name.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, like, it was the Murrah Federal Building. We knew it by the Murrah Federal Building.
Yeah.
But again, like, I live in Oklahoma, so that experience is different than it would have been as it played out on national news.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I think that one of the truly inescapably, like, I think, like, when you talk about the Challenger explosion and like what that, and like the loss of hope that represented, for me, that's Columbine.
Oh yeah,
that was because it was like, oh, and nothing is going to be done, and like that's where I get that same thing. And in a similar vein, I also think that there's positive equivalents, like the internet, like, and especially for me, getting a phone that could go on the internet was like, I mean, transformative. But yeah, I mean, I went into a career in games because I believe very strongly in them. I'm not in it currently, but I'm still pretty adjacent to it. And still what I do is like interactive media, because that, for me, there's so much in the games teach, and what they teach is important. And like, I think that a lot of people who don't understand that have derided games as meaningless for a very long time, and are now waking up to, I mean, to steal a meme, they just built systems. We grew up in them.
Well, and like every time there's anything game related that makes national news, I just roll my eyes because there's always this implied, for kids to everything they ever talk about video games.
Mm-hmm.
And that
video games are clearly for kids, just like animation.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing that I find really interesting is that mindset is losing ground at high speed because there are absolutely countries in the world that do not have that other piece on top, and they're skyrocketing.
Well, and it's generational too because like we see these articles that blame things on the millennials, and it's just trends of things going out of like favor. Like,
wait, the millennials? You mean like 30
somethings? They misappropriate. Like that's okay. This is the thing that cracks me up about generations. Like all of the okay boomers statements. They're actually talking about my generation.
They're actually talking
Gen
about
X.
Gen X. Yeah.
Like, they're not talking about boomers. My boss is a boomer. My parents are boomers. Like, they're on their way out. You're complaining about my generation. And then on the other side, when they're complaining about millennials, no, they're complaining about Gen Z. Millennials are 30-somethings, almost 40-somethings. But the thing is like, there's just been a reprioritization of, like, what is important. So like there was there were articles not long ago bemoaning the death of the diamond industry, and I'm like, good, sweet, go for it. I'm ready for it to burn down. Like,
shall not be mourned.
I didn't place value in it.
I bought an engagement ring last year. And one of the things that we discussed when talking about engagement rings was how we didn't want diamonds in it. Like, it wasn't just we don't put value in diamonds. We actively did not want an engagement ring with diamonds.
We've seen your business model and think it sucks.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, but there's so much stuff that was propagated for years on this chasing luxury, keeping up with the Joneses type model. And like, I don't think people care about it anymore.
This is how you know you've made it. How you know you're successful. You have these things.
Can you imagine if somebody tried to reboot Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous today?
Oh gosh,
you remember that show, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we have a lot of reality shows focused on celebrities, but I guess that was more of a going from celebrity to celebrity. I guess the closest thing more recent might be like Cribs.
That makes me think of the song more than makes me think of the show.
Yeah.
But for most people, making it is being able to pay your bills and have some money left over to do something fun with.
Yeah. It's like so much of what was sold as this is how you know you've made it is either just completely out of the reach of normal people, or they actively don't want it because, like in the case of diamonds, it's, bad, real bad. So yeah, I'm pretty sure some businesses have managed to keep pace with this sort of thing, like electric cars to a degree. I feel like are one of the current status symbols.
Food delivery,
yeah. Like there are current things that are kind of sold that way, but in part it's like sold as a look how good I'm being in some ways. Like I hate to use the term, I hate to say virtue signaling, but I feel like that's what corporations, when they try to sell something nowadays, that's where they're trying to go. I don't know how well it works.
Thalen, did you see the Larry King interview with Danny Pudi?
I'm on DuckTales.
I'm on DuckTales, Larry. It's a great encapsulation of this where
for anybody who hasn't seen it,
Larry King's like, so what's a luxury that you couldn't live without? And Danny's like, oh well, I love coffee. And Larry's like, coffee? Anyone can get coffee. It's like $5 at a Starbucks, whatever. It's like, oh,
fancy
okay.
coffee,
okay, socks. I love socks. It's like,
nice socks.
Everyone has socks. And then he's like, okay, what's a luxury, Larry? I don't know. Private jet.
The first Larry's like, socks are not a luxury.
Yeah. And then it's like, private jet? And it's like, Larry, I'm on DuckTales. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, and okay, like, to be fair, for a lot of people, stopping and getting a coffee is a luxury.
But that's the point. That's exactly how, like, Danny Putty considered it. And, like, this is the generational difference in mindsets, even amongst the rich and famous.
Yeah. Being able to have a coffee that somebody else made for you, that's a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not viewed as that by the previous generation.
Because it's not expensive. And I think that's part of it too, is the most recent generations do not value money as much as previous generations did. They value free time.
Yes.
And enjoyment. Because those are the things that are limited.
Yeah. I mean, I sure don't care about a Rolex, but a really nice meal out?
It's absolutely a luxury.
Well, and like, accumulation of wealth just isn't a goal for me. Like, that's not a thing I care about. Like, I mean, there's absolutely people in the world that like want money to get more money.
They want the numbers to get bigger.
And I don't know, I mean, like, for me, it was a situation that like, if your necessities are being met, then any additional money on top of that is worth less than it was before that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or at least for me, that's always been the case. Like,
it's not just you. Research has been done there.
Like once my needs were met, the motivation of going out and earning money was not where it was. Like, I used to do a bunch of side work. And I started off doing side work because, you know, we needed money. Like, the only fights that my wife and I have ever really had were when we didn't have money. And not that we're like have a ton of money now, but like we have reached that point where we're sustainable. Like,
you have enough money to handle the necessities and
right, exactly, like
have some left over for just whatever.
Right. And when that happened, we stopped fighting. Like, once we reached that point, we stopped fighting. And like, the only fights that we ever had were because we were concerned about finances. And I think that's the goal for most people now, not acquisition of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely think most of the folks that pushed up the GameStop stock price did it because they could.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they've always done it.
Sure, some of them ended up accidental millionaires.
Oh, the ones on Reddit. Because they saw an opportunity to. Why not?
I mean,
I can lose $50 on the chance of making some rich dude's life hell. Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good deal.
There's definitely a big sense of like, we can do this. It doesn't necessarily matter if we become millionaires. What matters is like, let's break the system.
Yeah.
I mean, and like, what cracks me up is the stocks that they're using are absolute losing stocks. Like, there's no way GameStop is not going to fall back down to ground.
That's why it works.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be losing stocks for this to work, because that's why they got shorted so hard. Is because they were obvious losers.
I mean, and the same is true as like AMC. AMC will not be a positive, like, in a long while.
They've taken this opportunity to get rid of a whole lot of their debt, so this might actually make it so they can survive the pandemic. And because they weren't going to. AMC was not going to survive COVID. It just wasn't going to happen. Now they might.
They might, but like, I think AMC will be the only one that does. Like, I think that the new market will only support one theater. chain. I think we're entering a post-theater age.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably be okay with just no theater chains and there being individual theaters owned, by individuals, like how it used to work back before everything became owned by giant chains. But hey, that's just me.
The problem is the mom and pops are going to get hit the worst.
Oh, they'll get, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because they just recently got hit by having to go digital.
Right. But it's possible that if enough of the big chains die off due to this, that maybe some smaller things could grow up in, where they used to be. It's like when a forest of giant trees all get killed and suddenly, all sorts of little plants can grow where they used to be, blocking out all the sun. Could happen. Maybe I'm an optimist.
The coolest thing I have seen in a long time is the shopping mall that has been completely refactored into a school with like shop class in the Sears Mechanics garage.
Ooh, that's a brilliant idea.
It's so cool. The business center repurposed into a computer lab. Individual shops are classrooms. There's plenty of parking for every student because it's a high school.
Now you're talking fantasy.
There's tons of public transportation to it. And it's great.
We kind of went in a weird direction in that last topic.
Games, they're important.
Yo, for legal reasons, this was not financial advice.
Definitely not. We only pretend to know what we're talking about.
Do we?
I don't think
we don't even pretend.
I've never once claimed to know what we're talking about.
We like the games.
Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoy the show. We will be back next week, obviously. Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.